ugly girl or something like that. No, but then I understudied Salome Jens, and I got to play the wife of this early in my career. But Kazan at that time was enormously helpful to all the actors, and he worked in an organic way. He worked with the characters. He found a way to mix yourself with the character, and he had enormous energy, which Lumet does as well, which is really important because that lifts us always. And he had very perceptive analysis and acute understanding of each character. There's a book that he did, What's the Spine of the Play, the characters and all of that. You all know it. And I adored him, and I think that he deserves great memory. I think there were some political difficulties at one point, and I personally think that I won't say, I don't know who's blamed, but who can judge ever, but he's very important to our culture, to the culture of actors, and he laid down a tradition that has been followed by Sidney Lumet, by all of them really, Pollock almost. He has his own stuff as well, had his own stuff as well. Almost everyone, well, the whole acting generation has been influenced by Brando and by him, and they kind of wrote the book. And what it's based on is organically acting and somehow finding a way to feed your own experience into that. If you've been, destroyed at one point in your life, that finds its way in. You don't necessarily use it as something that you do instead of the actor, but you start from backstory so that you have something. You know where your character's been, you know what he's done, and you know all of that. And a lot of people didn't used to do that. And so for me, he was the master, and I'm always very grateful to him.
Thanks. And one of the character that stay forever, I guess, in the cinema history and in our mind and heart is for sure. And one of the, I think it was the acting that revealed you is the character of Bonnie Parker in Bonnie and Clyde, by Arthur Penn. So I'd like to ask you a couple of things. Maybe how do you seize the character, and then how do you make it real? How do you make it Bonnie?
Well, it's almost a matter of looking at Bonnie and Evelyn Mulwray and all of the roles, because all of them touch something real in me. They have to. But Bonnie was me. Because I was born, in the South, in a small, modest community in North Florida. And the language, of course, the dialect, I knew immediately. I'd grown up with it. And she was terribly poignant. I love the line at the end where she says, I thought we were going somewhere, but this is it. We're just going. Do you understand what that means? We're just going. We're running, we're going, but we're not going anywhere. And the end was inevitable, of course. But they were too innocent, naive, desperate. It was the Depression. To know that, and all they knew was they were trying to get out to something finer, something better. But she was, in many ways, my favorite character, because she was talented and good and nutty and, mistaken in terms of her choices.
Yeah, and how it was also, I think that you also pay a lot of attention in terms of acting, also how to deal with your partner in acting. So I'd like to ask you something about the relation, especially in Bonnie and Clyde with Clyde, with Warren Beatty.
Okay, now what was the first thing you said? There was something special about the relationship?
I'd like to ask you how you work in your acting also in response to the acting of other...
Well, Warren Beatty is probably the smartest man in Hollywood and the most tenacious, and I learned a lot just from watching him, and he never gives up. He used to say, whoever gets tired first loses the battle. And he was just an enormous, charismatic, you know, they thought pretty boy in Hollywood, but he turned out to be, he created a classic in Bonnie and Clyde and many others as well. But working with him, Warren's always got something going on that you don't quite know what it is. And he's a wonderful actor, by the way. I was watching some of it as well, because you're blinded by how great looking he is and what a great personality he has. But the intellect is very, very formidable with him. I enjoyed working with him, obviously. You enjoy working with the people who have their game, who have their whole game together, and he did. And he tried new things. He was wise enough to choose Arthur Penn, because Arthur Penn began in the theater, and you know, what was the one he did with Patty Duke, Miracle Worker, and he really was a smart, intelligent, talented director. It's a pity he didn't do more, and unfortunately, when you live in New York, sometimes you do more, you do less. But if you live in California, you do less good work usually. So he was. He helped so much, and he was also very intelligent with the script. He knew what was wrong with the script. And Warren chose him. He assembled a team. It was the first time I'd seen that done. I'm working on my first feature. I've done a few smaller films as a director, because directing fascinates me. Now, when you get to know a craft, and acting is such a tricky craft, because it really is taking pieces out of yourself always in a certain way. And I've become fascinated and, you know, very interested in directing. Most actors do. But I forgot where I was.
How you answered the question, because I said how you work with Warren Bean.
I go on and on. He once did 32 takes.
Oh.
And you had to keep alive every take. But he was indefatigable, and he was a perfectionist. So.
And also the acting in your character, also the look is very important. I'm referring to Bonnie as
the look. Yeah.
The look.
Someone asked me what I thought Bonnie would wear, and I said, well, blue jeans, perhaps. So, no, we brought on, Warren brought on the most. She became quite a star, but Theodora Van Runkel, she's gone now too, and she just was brilliant. She came up with all of these looks, and you know, the suits and the dress of the time. You know, that first little dress that she did was amazing. It was just a little piece of muslin, and you could kind of see through it and kind of nod, and it was poor, you know, and that's what needed to be established. And then she moved into those suits they were just so right. Who would guess that? But I'm not I mean, I love costumes and I love wardrobe, but she really created a style. Everyone then imitated Bonnie's look for quite a long time. So she was the one I would say is one of the best costume designers I've ever worked with. And Thea Silbert was the other one from Chinatown.
So maybe let's switch to Chinatown, which stay as a... We actually screened the film as a pre-festival. So Evelyn Murray, at the beginning of the film, seems a very refined people, very detached. But little by little, you manage also to discover that he's also a fragile character. And
also
fragile, that is...
Fragile.
Fragile.
Oh, yeah. Enormously so.
Yeah, and I think that is also because of the script you have, because Chinatown has a fabulous script, and...
Robert Towne,
yeah,
really, know, was mostly responsible for that. It kicked around for a very long time. Benton did quite a nice script as well, but Towne was brought in, and he was able to bring well, he was a friend of Warren's. But I wanted to address what was the first thing you said? I'm sorry, I'm jet lagged.
The thing is, how do you manage to create this character, Evelyn Mulray, which is changing a lot during the film.
Oh, Evelyn Mulray.
Yeah, Mulray.
Well, because that's the character one likes most to play, because she's got a secret. And she then can convey what the audience doesn't know, but you know everything. You guys see more than we know. You see, you do that and you know what it means. But she was she had a great, deep, dark past, which she was shameful about, and you know, always created a kind of neurotic thing because she was always trying to hide that past. And of course it dealt with incest, and she was of a certain manner born. She was Pasadena, she was the elegant Los Angelinan. And so she used that as a shield, of course, and she didn't reveal a lot of herself, so that the actor got a chance to do things that the character didn't know she was doing, like lighting 2 cigarettes at the same time. And it was a sign that she was nervous, right? And Jack pointed that out. But it's interesting because you can pop through with stuff that the character doesn't know she's doing, but the actor has to know she's doing it, and she has to have those moments add up at the end to the denouement, the truth.
You had in mind the film is set in the 30s, so you had in mind some actress when you decided to play? No?
Well, no, you can't, because the actress is on the page. The actress, you know, I mean, the character's on the page. And Town's script was so wonderful, and that combined with my knowledge of, you know, of a lot about her, because immediately I was a country girl, they made me very sophisticated. Hollywood does that. But I understood her interior, because we all have our secrets. And we are all ashamed of them, and we're all frightened about them, but they're harmless. I mean, as long as it's a secret, it's harmful. But when you're open, although you can't be too open, but the script delineated that kind of double duet between the Evelyn we don't know and the Evelyn we see. And I was hoping that in the Evelyn we see, there was specific moments, and also threading through it was just something not right. She's not telling us everything. So that's important, because she wasn't telling you everything, and I had to convince you that I wasn't telling everything, you know.
Yeah. And just to change completely, the way you also, I'm thinking about the rhythm of the acting, the rhythm of the word. So Evelyn seems to me very
cadence, yes.
Yeah, and then to take the other opposite, when you go to Diane Christensen in Network, there is a speed and
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, we're in California, which it's very speedy at one time, but I mean, these were the elegant rich. These were people who didn't have to rush, who didn't rush, who set the pace. And also, we've got a woman dealing inside with a lot of stuff that she does not want to reveal, so she's careful not to reveal it. So it's a little bit, and it's also noir. It's a wonderful, I think, film of film noir, and it's a mystery, which was brilliant for Robert to do that, because usually the mystery is the Maltese Falcon, and this mystery had to do with this woman that Jack couldn't figure out, and I knew but couldn't tell him and couldn't let him know until the end when he forced it out of me. So
so going to Network, which is
so Network. I wanted you all to see Network, because there was, right now there is such a speed with which you really do have to act. You have to think fast, because you lose the audience otherwise. David Fincher is one of my mentors, and I think he's a wonderful, wonderful director. I loved I love the one that, which one am I thinking of? Zodiac.
Zodiac, yeah.
Because it had such poignancy as well, and that guy didn't kill 2 people. He killed about 12, because their lives were destroyed. Looking for him, trying to find who he was, knowing who he was, but couldn't nail him. And it was a very mysterious, you know, film from that point of view. But most of all, I liked the pace, because when you looked at the script, which made the studios very nervous, it was all dialogue. It was all dialogue. And Sidney, we always joked with him that he directed on roller skates. And he kind of did, because he wanted to keep the pace up, And he kept getting us, we had to know the lines so cold that we could rip through them, because it was that kind of modern, now that's not uncommon for people to, I've heard of 2 or 3 other actors who says, no, cut the pause. And I had a lovely young director, my first play on Broadway, who said, act on the line, not between the lines. So, you know, we've always known that you've got to get on with it, and you've got to have your preparation already done. And so it comes as a flash, and you have to put it in the words somehow. So Network was the fastest paced movie I've ever done. It was Patty Chayefsky, lovely, lovely writer, brilliant writer. And it just, it had to be fast, I think, because it was about now. It was about news, when getting onto it right away was important. And I think the style of directing was very good from Sidney.
And the film, by the way, it is quite prophetic also.
Yeah, I know, it was prophetic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Everything happened.
Yeah.
Not quite Sybil the Soothsayer, but I bet you she's there somewhere.
Yeah, and of course, you get an award for this prize, for this film.
Was it that one? Yes.
Yeah, it was that one.
We were nominated several times.
But just to ask you something, because also acting is a matter of choice, a character, to choose to do it or not to do it. And I know that the Diane Christensen character is not that easy.
Diana Christensen, yeah.
Because
that's where I was lucky, or my instinct didn't fail me. Because a lot of wonderful actors, like Sharon Stone, is brilliant. She's just brilliant, and somehow made certain wrong choices after that incredible one. She's a good friend of mine, and she's a really cool lady. But I somehow chose the right ones. I chose the ones that I think would speak to the audience, and I listened to my instinct, and I ended up with perhaps more than most people that were really good, you know? But it's also luck and Divina. Thank you.
there is one scene in the film, it's in Network, I mean, it's quite intimate, but it's really unique, and it's the love scene where you're speaking during, and it's incredible. I think it was written, but the way you...
I said, Sidney, I can't do that.
I think it was
really...
really...
There's no way I can do that. He said, yes, you can.
I mean, how do you manage? Because I guess it was quite complicated to perform at the same time, to speak a lot of
Well, that's
text.
how she did everything. She never did anything without the world of her work and television and what can we do next and how can we be ahead of everybody. And, you know, that was her, she was a TV baby. She was, you know, that's who she was, that's how she grew up, that's how many of our kids usually are growing up now, except it's more on computer and all of that, and speakerphones, and iPhones, and maybe one moment summed it up, because at the end, he was leaving me. Holden was leaving. I didn't want him to leave, but I didn't know that I didn't want him to leave, because that part of me was locked away. It didn't ever develop into emotion, into real human being, basically. She was an automaton of TV, and that's all she thought of, and maybe that's how you be successful. But Holden, just before he left, said, I think I told this story before, I hope I didn't tell it to you all, but Holden said, he said, because, you know, that's who you are, Diana. You don't know how to love, and can't remember his exact name. And you were born the wrong way. You don't know how. You just don't know how. And I looked up at him, and I heard, cut. And I said, no, Sidney, I had a whole thing planned there. He said, the look said it all, because you looked at him like he was from Mars. And that's why he's a great director. But that was it, you see. She was cut off completely. I mean, Arthur Miller did it first with Death of a Salesman, and he talked about alienation of emotion. I mean, Willie Loman was completely alienated from what, you know, he really had. He had to push. He had to try to make it in American society. He had to try to take care of his kids. And when he failed at all of that, he killed himself. But this one also, you know, had that network.
Yeah.
What was I saying about that? I got hung up with Miller.
You said you just say about Ardo Miller, but you
No, but we were talking about what film?
network we were talking about.
Senility.
Uh,
No. What was I saying about network?
You say about the acting, about the cinema that you catch your
That last moment, yeah. But it's
because
about.
it's a matter also. I think what you're
Help me
great
out.
is also to reveal the unconscious of your character sometimes, somehow, and sometimes, and in this performance you speak a lot. But it's true that in this moment, just the look.
Just the look did it,
tells a
you
lot,
know,
yeah.
and Sidney was wise enough to know that. Like in Bonnie and Clyde, when we ran through that corn, if you all remember that. But the sun went behind a cloud, so a shadow came over these people, and they said, we have to cut. The light changed. He said, don't you dare, don't cut. Arthur Penn said this because he used it a couple of times, because that was the shadow coming over these characters. And he used it later as well, because they were not going to live happy lives, and they were going to end up, you know, dead.
Maybe I'll let the audience
Yeah.
ask you something.
Definitely.
I think they are all here also for that. So if there is a microphone in the room, just grab the occasion. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Dunaway, thank you for
Where are
being
you?
with us
Where are
here,
Yes.
far away. I wanted to ask you about Chinatown. We saw the film 2 nights ago in the Piazza Grande, and it was great. And there is a scene which always puzzled me, which is where you collapse on the steering wheel and the horn goes out.
Wait a minute, say that again. I collapsed
When you are just you just met your
That's
daughter's
it.
sister, and you enter the car and you collapse on the steering wheel in a moment of very dramatic tension.
Yeah.
And the horn goes out,
well, I
and
got
I
shot.
always
I
ask
got
myself,
shot.
is that
I was shot, and I chose to go on. I don't know whose idea it was. It might have been the director's or mine. And my head went forward, and it happened to hit the horn, and so that, you know, was
it makes it
obviously good
funny
resonance.
immediately? It changes the atmosphere immediately. This
It
kind
changes
of horn,
what?
The
The
atmosphere.
atmosphere. The atmosphere.
The atmosphere, well,
It
what
just-
it did was, no, you know, I mean, the reason for that was I think there was something very eerie about it. It was something, pay attention about it, you know, it was just a wonderful moment where a sound just exploded on the scene.
So it was wanted. It was wanted.
Yeah.
Wanted,
Yes.
you needed
The
it, yeah.
director wanted
No,
that.
that was Roman. I
Okay.
think it was Roman. It could have been me. I can't remember.
Thank you very much.
I think there is another question here.
And you're after that.
Yeah. Women first. You're right.
A proposito della sua... Traduci tu,
Sì.
Carlo.
Keep it.
Sì, strettissimo. A proposito della sua passione per la regia, aveva un progetto qualche anno fa dedicato a Maria Callas, dalle lezioni di Maria Callas tenute negli Stati Uniti. Una cosa secondo me meravigliosa, l'ha recitata a teatro. Volevo sapere che fine ha fatto questo progetto.
We would like to know about a project you had about Maria Callas. Have. About Maria Callas. You act on theater, he said.
Yes,
and,
I did for a year.
And he would like to know if the idea of putting on cinema, on stage, you know, the film, you mean, yeah. And if
Well,
the film,
that's
whatever
a whole
about
different story. You can say that, yes, it developed the role, but not nearly, you know. I mean, I made up my mind to try to find, I mean, when I played it on stage, I said, I'll play it if you'll let me buy the rights. And finally, after all kinds of, you know, wallowing to get out of it and everything, I bought the rights with my own money. Because, you know, Barry Diller was the one who hit me with it at one point. I mean, you have to own something. You have to own it. Not because you want to control it, but because you want to choose the correct team that will help to realize what you believe is the writer's intention. And that doesn't happen sometimes when studios do it, because they aren't artists. They know a lot about cinema, you know, but they can make very wrong decisions. I mean, the second film of Craig Brewer was just, forgive me, but that's a great he's a great playwright. You know, when he did it with Terrence,
Terrence, yeah.
no, is it Clarence? No.
Uh,
Terrence.
Terrence Malick, you mean Terrence
No,
Malick?
he was the writer of this, but the African American man, sorry, but who was in another film before that, but he became a star because of Hustle and Flow, right? Okay. So I mean, what I was in, and DIY was just happening, do it yourself. And I knew that if it went into other hands, I don't want to control it. I want to say, what do you think? What do you think? People I trust, you know? I mean, Francis Couple will ask the doorman, and so will I. What do you think about this? Because you need that kind, and also there's something that happens when you communicate with another person. But you don't want someone who's going to make the wrong decision, you know? So I accepted to do the role only on the condition that they sold me the rights, because I had worked with Warren Beatty. And he didn't control that project, but he might as well have, because he went through all kinds of shenanigans to get what he felt was the right thing for the movie from the studio people. He's very good with the studio people. But what I wanted to do is own it and control. I paid my own money for it. I then watched overhead forever because it's taken longer. You know, I'm an unknown basically as a director. I did one very sweet short film that played Chicago and Berlin and places like that. But I knew it was a role that you're not going to find the like of too many more times in your life. And what I mean, the thing I liked most is that that woman changed an art form. She changed it. Not many can say that. And she was, what Fellini is to movies, she was to opera. And that's what interests you. It's about art. It's about how you do it, what it means, how you do it really well. That's what she keeps saying in the film, and she's absolutely adamant, and she doesn't give a darn, and she speaks an American idiom all the time. She's very funny. And she was born in the Bronx, and she has a kind of, sometimes she speaks with the English because she spent a lot of time over there. But then she will say things like, "You're standing on my foot," you know, and it's from the Bronx, right? So her method of expression is really interesting. But what's wonderful, and I don't know that we'll ever know the answer, Will always has a very big part in it. She was a great, great artist. She was the greatest artist for over a period of, well, 9 or 10 years, and then she met Onassis, and then for 9 years she didn't sing. She lost her art. So it's really about, you know, we all want to know, how do we have a personal life? How do we really achieve the heights in our art that we want to, make it as good as it can possibly be? And too often the answer is you can't. It's one or the other. And to her, and she had a very tragic life, but she was just, when you saw her on stage, she was unbelievable, although she only had an 8th grade education. But she was able to transfer, she had enormous talent, enormous talent. So, you know, I bought it because it was a great role, and it also happened to coincide with my greatest interest, except for my son Liam, which is cinema. I'm a cinephile. I love film. I think it's the art form of the 20th century or the 21st century. And it's fascinating. You know, it's fascinating what you can do visually. And I studied David Fincher for a long time. I've studied Bergman and all of those people. I watched Zodiac 21 times. And I took notes all the time. But you have, like the great painters, the young painters would imitate those paintings, you know, and you learn a lot when you watch a great director work and you talk to him. So that's how that started, and I was determined to do it myself, and somehow keep the control and choose the group. Like Fred Roos is my producer. He has worked with Francis Coppola forever, and he's one of the most wonderful men in Hollywood, and the smartest and the most human. So I'm gathering together Randall Kleiser, who did Grease. It looks like he wants to sort of, you know, help me with the directing, and that would be fantastic. There's a lot of blue screen. We've shot some plates already. I've shot half of it. and I intend to shoot the rest of it very soon.
Oh,
I'm not going to tell you when.
that's good. Looking forward. I think there was another question.
Yes,
yeah.
there
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a great, great honor to see you and meet you.
No, thank you
And
all
to-
for having me.
And to thank you for being such a wonderful role model for women and girls in our society
Thank you. Well, I hope so.
as an intelligent, assertive woman who stands her ground. Which leads me to the question. Your role is Bonnie. For me personally, it was amazing how you educated people about who Bonnie really was as a poet, the poetical side.
She
which-
actually did do all that, yeah.
Afterwards, I learned a beautiful side of her, but that takes me to the question, how do you feel as a very intelligent, integrated, assertive person about the violence that comes...
Why did I know that was coming?
Yeah, exactly.
It was
So, because-
treated
so
incredible.
please,
You know, finish.
and your personality is so comes through so great, comes through
Yeah.
so strongly that we sometimes it's a tendency to forget the movies are very violent.
Well,
so how do you
hang
feel
on,
about the
hang on.
violence in the movies
What
and your
are
personal-
studios
Thank you.
making now, if not violent movies? You know, and you know, you can't ignore violence. You know, I mean, that was a period where people were desperate. It was the Depression, and what I loved about the violence is that it was very well directed. That this was, I mean, you're going back many, many years there because it actually was one of the first things we heard. But you know, it's part of life. It's part of life, and it is, in fact, what you have to go through if you're a criminal. You know, that's what you've chosen and what the circumstances of society have given you and permitted you to choose because there's no money anywhere. You know, I mean, you have to find some way. Like now we're having trouble economically and everything. But I think forgive me, I don't know what you think, but I think people sometimes forget how beautifully Arthur Penn handled that violence. For example, the death of Bonnie and Clyde was a mixture of slow motion, fast, it was just artistically handled. And I mean, you cannot ignore violence. I mean, now particularly, it's there. I don't know what else. I'm not for violence. All we want to do is to try to get people to live happily together. But we're talking about the Depression, where everybody was desperate. We're talking about people who did turn criminal and hoods, and as a result, would ultimately be killed. The violence was so graphically and indelibly photographed, and the rhythms played with so much that you remember it perhaps more than just bang and you're dead. So that I would like you to look at a little bit more. But, you know, there's no comparing, you know, how much violence we go through now in life, for God's sake, as opposed to back then. That was a work of art. That was a classic film that Warren Beatty did, and it's really due to him, Arthur Penn, and all. He chose Estelle Parsons. I got the role by the skin of my teeth, I think. Susie Weld wanted it. But it turned out to be okay. Arthur at one point said either she does it or I don't, which was great. But all of the supporting people, Michael J. Pollard, Hackman was discovered in that film. So it's Warren's judgment and his intelligence and his vision of how he saw this could be a part of American history that would not die. And it, you know, I keep saying the classic film relates to how he shot it, how he dealt with the violence. And people want something more in a movie. I think they don't want to go and have people very quietly, how are you? Drama is conflict. And when there's conflict, one person is going to lose. So,
No,
but I understand.
Yeah, just wait for the microphone. Just wait for the microphone for the translation.
Getting back to one of the romantic films that you played with Marlon Brando, how was it to play with him?
Divine. It was wonderful, you know, because he was so alive emotionally. And he came up with more ideas. We said, what should we do here? And he would, I forget what it was, throw popcorn in his tummy or something like that. He was a complete original, really, and he permitted himself to be that. And he invented acting for us, for my generation and generations before. And he was just an incredibly talented, innovative individual, and Kazan was part of that. How was it to work with him? He was a sweetheart. You haven't lived until you see Marlon get out of a limo in his robe, having just got out of bed. He was so funny. But, you know, he never lost touch somehow. He was never false. He never lost touch with what the character would do, and he combined that with this incredible fantasy. You know, the ideas he came up with on the spot were unusual and I think unique. And he was a lovely man. Lovely man.
Yes? I think there is a question over here.
Actually, two questions.
Cheating.
You first said how important it is to choose the right role, the right character. Do you have one role you regret to choose, and now you regret that you had not played it?
No, I don't have any of those. But what I do have, and I don't know why, I have to thank God for it really, because he gave me the instinct and the mind and everything else that had accumulated inside me, the persona, to know when something would hit. Like everyone said, you can't play Network. She's not a human being. And I said, no, I have to play that. Because it represented where women were going there, where people were going, where they were losing their humanity a mile a minute, you know. So I don't know, I mean, I chose all of them myself. They were presented to me, and of course Bonnie, who he could never have turned down. Chinatown, I was really fun to play because of Jack and the whole essence, the complication of the woman. But I just got lucky, and the boss up there sort of helped me choose. You know, I mean, we don't do it alone. We do it with a team, and we're all, God's in all of us, you know. He's in everything. I mean, however you understand it. And I'm not a born-again Christian or any of that. I am Catholic. But I think you get a prompting. My mentor, William Alfred, used to say, a prompting comes, and if you listen to that prompting, you'll probably go the right way.
And do you have a special advice for young actresses who is now starting their career and want to end up like you?
They have to learn their craft. It's best to start on stage. Rather than just studying. I learned on stage. You learn by repetition, repetition. Every night. What I found about Maria, for example, on the road, when I did it for a year, is you had no idea what you had inside. I didn't know I thought that. I didn't know I felt that about that, because you tap into something different. I don't know if it's magical or art or what it is, but it's art. I think, and that you know, that's what gets you through.
Thank you.
Yes, I think there is another question, and then maybe I will.
The lovely lady in front.
Pardon me, it's a very short question and a short answer, please. I know you're in a hurry.
No.
So it's for Exclusive Magazine in Geneva. We have a special page with these questions. So what would you like?
Special page on what?
With these questions for some special people like you.
Is there something I can borrow to fan? I had a fan. Where's my fan? Do you have my fan? Do you have the fan?
Oh.
It gets hot. The lights, though. Yes, go ahead, please.
We just want to know, if you could, what would you change in this world, if you could?
Oh, Lord.
Only one thing, many things, but just the principal thing.
Well, you can't change human nature, and you can't change what you have become over a period of 50 years. You can change it, but most people don't want to change it, and they're too lazy to change it, and they've been indoctrinated, you know. What would I change? You know, that's an interesting question. What would I change in the world? That people would be kinder. Just kinder. Just, you know, try to understand where their anger would be coming from. Why did I behave in that way? And try to change it. Just by will, say, nope, I'm not doing that this time. And be kinder to each other.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, I think we can do it.
Okay.
Do you want to do some autograph or
We can do a few, yeah, but I can't do a million.
No, a few.
Okay.
Thank you very much to Ms. Faye Dunaway. Thanks a lot.